What are your views on marriage as a whole, as far as like what you think of it and what you think it is going on in this environment when it comes to marriage?
I don't know. You know what? With marriage, sorry, my eyeball, it's so typical. We're trying to shoot something and my contact lens wants to start acting up, honestly. Anyway,
just say you're being like extremely emotional. You're just trying to wipe the tears. I have that effect on people. You know what I mean?
You haven't made me cry just yet, love. Try harder.
All right. Challenge accepted.
Yeah, go on. Yeah, I think marriage is a great idea. I think really what marriage will do is force you to be the highest version of yourself because of everything that you have to learn in order to have a successful partnership. So I get it as a concept. I think it's fantastic, but I just think that people must know what it is, you know, that they're signing up for. And it's not like a fairy tale walk into the sunset. You can love somebody, but just know that all relationships take effort. You know what I mean?
Okay.
So I think that, yeah, there's a problem there with like what people want it to be. People don't really want to have to try. If they start having to try, they feel like it's failing.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. That's a good point. Like, I've had this conflict with the concept where, like, because people say that marriage is you know, a true sign that, you know, you want to be with this person, but also marriage is also the very vehicle that also makes people stop trying. You see what I mean? And it's this conflict where it's like, well, you know, we're each other's person, so you're going to be here forever. I'm going to be here forever. So, and you say these vows and you say, for better or for worse, I'm here. So people think they can just exhibit the worst and the person's going to be here. If you think about what you're really saying, right? And I think that's the challenge that exists. Do you feel like that is part of what is occurring in today's environment, or?
I think you're spot on there. I do. I think you're spot on, you know, but I also think people forget that there's no such thing as like anything can change at the drop of a hat. Like, we think we know people, we think things are forever. We think, you know what I mean? And we kind of take that for granted. But I think the minute that you start thinking that you've got someone in the bag is the minute that you're slipping into an illusion, because anyone can up and leave you at any minute. And remembering that, it will keep you on your toes.
So how does someone remember that when they're making vows saying that I'll love you unconditionally?
Because you've got to remember, this is a human being. They're not like, you're still a person with your own thoughts and your secret world that I'll never ever know. There's always so much more than what you think, you know, like, you're a human being. That means that there's always going to be a part of you that I will never ever know. And I cannot own you. Because it's impossible. You're a human being, you know? You know,
I thoroughly appreciate the fact that that's the response you gave, because at first when you said, you know, you think marriage is a good thing and so on and so forth, whenever people say that, and particularly when I hear ladies talk about marriage, there's always this illusion that when you're married, all problems are solved, right? And a lot of men don't see it that way, right?
Yeah.
A lot of men are fearful of marriage, right? For a multitude of reasons, and one of the reasons is you don't necessarily know what you're going to get on the other end of the other side of the fence, right? And you're signing up for this thing that you're sacrificing for, because it is a sacrifice. And the fact that you are consciously aware that you are with someone that is a human being, that is a constant change, at least tells me that awareness will allow you to at least know that you might have to do some work to maintain it. Whereas some people are like, I'm marrying this person, this is the person I want for the rest of my life. When in reality, it's not. You know what I mean? And you have to be prepared for that. And I think what you said is very powerful. So I commend you for having it.
And I think, like, what I wanted to ask you though, what do you think you're sacrificing?
As a man? I don't think men are naturally monogamous.
Okay.
Yeah, men are not naturally monogamous, and I think also men are not naturally compromising. You see what I mean? So if you think about the idea of typical masculinity, a man wants to go his own way, do his own thing, and don't have to answer to anybody, just like in the brunt of it, right? Obviously there's collaboration with the world, but like if you really think about it, what a lot of people who like masculine men also like the ones that are headstrong, they're focused, and they're doing their own thing. What comes with marriage and relationship, there's a lot of compromise, there's a lot of adjustment, there's a lot of like, okay, we'll do it your way this time, we'll, this, that, and the third, which it takes a lot of energy if that's not who you naturally were all the time, especially if you're used to being by yourself and so on and so forth. I was watching, this is going to sound really off, but just hear me out, right? I was, years ago, I was eating a sandwich at a park, right? And there were these kids, and I was just looking at these kids. I was just watching these kids run around and play, right? And I was eating a sandwich, and these kids, they belonged to some school where they were having some recess, and the kids were like, I don't know, 4 or 5 years old or something like that, right? And I'm watching these kids run around. There's like a lot of noise, and the teachers are like trying to attend to these kids. But I noticed something, right? All the running around and climbing and beating on each other and all this rah, rah, rah were all the little boys, right? They're running around, they're independently just, right? Yeah. And but for the little girls, they had these little crop circles. They were just sitting under a tree in a circle. There's like 3 big circles of different girls, but the guys are just climbing. They're just hitting each other, then running off, and this, that, and a third. So even from the moment that you're young, the kind of energy you bring into this world is very different. You have a very different independence. So for men, that's one sacrifice. And then if you're looking at the sacrifice of monogamy, I call it a sacrifice because naturally, especially as we evolved prior to the Industrial Revolution, where we're raising families and doing this, that, and the third, in order for the species to survive, we were designed to inseminate as many women as possible because the chance of survival for any offspring was very low back then. So you needed to like inseminate as many people as possible, and then the woman had to choose the strongest man to inseminate, and so on and so forth, in order to have the strongest offspring to survive famine, predators, and so on and so forth. That's how we were designed. So we're still wired that way in some capacity, even though we coach ourselves and we socialize ourselves in order to fit the environment that we're in, because we can't just have kids all over.
You're absolutely right, but the thing is, what I would put to you is that actually monogamy doesn't benefit women in the same way that it benefits men.
No, I agree with you.
You know what I mean? Women actually do worse mentally in lots of ways when they marry. Men do better. Do you know what I mean? It's just men have this cognitive dissonance. They think they're making this big sacrifice, when actually it's the woman who's making the sacrifice by and large.
I agree with you.
That's why it's important for women to choose the right man, because that's the only way they can redress that balance.
Yes, I agree with you 1,000%. There's no disagreement, but a man's not going to go into it with that in mind. He's going into it knowing what he knows he's used to and what he's giving up in that sense. And it doesn't help that socially as well as legally, a lot of things aren't necessarily in his favor, so he's going to steer away from it for a lot of reasons. So a lot of men are very particular about just even entering into that rather than just jumping into it ASAP.
Interesting. I feel like socially it works in men's favor to be married.
Again,
the social benefits work better for them.
Again, if you look at it from the lens of, okay, if you're a man and you're deciding to get married, right? Socially, that man is looked at as, okay, you need to do this in order for you to be looked at as a viable person on the planet, right? Or you need to be responsible for all this. Anything that goes wrong in the relationship, it's your fault. Anything that goes, excuse me?
That's a stretch.
No, I'm just saying.
Anything that goes on wrong in the relationship.
No, think about it. If a guy cheats, right? They're gonna say, "What an asshole, he cheated." If a woman cheat, the first thing they'll say is, "What did he do to entice her to cheat?" That's usually.
No.
I'm just telling.
Who's they?
Anytime I've ever had a conversation about a woman doing something wrong in a relationship that falls along the lines of that, the first thing that comes into play is he must have done something to make her want to do that, right? And I even saw it in scenarios, and this is an extreme. There was a social experiment that was done, and I mentioned this on a previous in a previous episode where there was a social experiment where they had a woman who was walking down the street with a guy, and they had the guy being overly aggressive with her. Like, they were a couple, but he was being overly aggressive. He was being abusive verbally. He was kind of grabbing her and shoving, and people were coming to her aid, like, oh my God, don't do that to her. Don't do that to her. And then they flipped it. They brought the guy out with the woman. And this time the woman was being super aggressive and beating on the guy, just literally beating him down. And everybody was laughing at the guy and wasn't really coming to his aid. And then when they interviewed the people that were passing by, and they were saying, how come you laughed at this guy? Why didn't you help? Why didn't you provide any, whatever? And a lot of the people said, well, the first thing we thought is he probably deserved it. He probably did something that made her want to do that. That's where people's default is. So a lot of men don't feel like they are well represented when they need something. So that's a sacrifice in itself. You see what I mean? And nothing that you said is wrong. I do, and to your point, I do agree. A lot of men do benefit from healthy long-term relationships, and a lot of women suffer because they sacrifice a lot on the back end that a lot of people don't know about. But it's just one of those things where it's not properly communicated, and it doesn't always happen that way for a lot of people.